On Friday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told us there's no problem with Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz, except for one problem.
The only thing prohibiting transit in the straits right now is Iran shooting at shipping. It is open for transit should Iran not do that.
Yes, that is ironclad logic. Good news, Miss Nichols. Your husband's surgery went perfectly. He should be ready to take home as soon as he's done at the crematorium. Hegseth also got mad that the media has been accurately reporting what's happening.
Another example of a fake headline that I saw yesterday. War widening. Here's a real headline for you for an actual patriotic press. How about Iran shrinking, going underground?
And here's another fake headline. Secretary Hegseth visibly agitated, alcohol on breath. Here's a real one. Here's a real one for a patriotic press. Secretary Hegseth named Diamond member of TGI Friday's Tequila Honors Program. Okay? It's the same story. Okay? You got a problem, bro? You got a problem?
You've got top defense leadership basically saying there's no issue. It's open for transit unless Iran shoots at ships. That's like saying, great news, the house isn't on fire except for the flames. It's the kind of logic that would get you laughed out of a middle school debate club, and yet it's being offered to the American people as reassurance that boils down to everything is fine as long as the thing that's happening stops happening. That's not reassurance. That's denial with a podium. And when denial fails, Trump's team does what it always does. It attacks the messenger. The defense secretary gets irritated that the media is accurately reporting what's happening and starts complaining about fake headlines like war widening, then tries to pitch his own patriotic press headlines, because in Trumpism, patriotism is not love of country. Patriotism is obedience. Patriotism is a demand that you describe reality the way Trump wants it described, even if that description is ridiculous. Because here's the adult reality: wars widen. That's what wars do. When leadership doesn't have a plan, doesn't have coalition support, and doesn't have an off-ramp, they widen through retaliation, through proxy forces, through infrastructure strikes, through shipping disruptions, through energy shock, through miscalculation. Widening isn't a headline problem, it's a strategic problem. But Trump's people don't want strategy. They want a headline that flatters. Now, Trump's personal behavior during this is the most alarming piece. While the country is supposed to be watching him lead, he's posting like a man in a rage, spiral, threats, curses, and this constant theme: open the strait or else. And then he does the most Trump thing imaginable. After posting like a warlord, he goes to his golf course and starts calling reporters Fox, Axios, ABC, shopping his narrative around like he's doing crisis PR, not national security. Notice what he tells one outlet. We were close to talks, then they delayed, so he attacked the bridge, and now negotiations are going very well. Think about how insane that sounds. They made me mad, so I bombed infrastructure, and now we're close to peace. That's not negotiation. That's coercion mixed with fantasy coercion, because he's threatening civilians and infrastructure. Fantasy because the other side keeps saying they are not negotiating with him. And the pattern is the point. Trump wants the markets calm and the headlines soft. So he creates the impression of talks, then he threatens major escalation. If talks fail, then he resets the deadline, then he does it again. That's not an off-ramp. That's a treadmill designed to keep him in the starring role. And every time he does it, he is putting American pilots and troops at greater risk, not because tough talk is inherently evil, but because this talk is sloppy, public, impulsive, and unmoored from a coherent end state. Even people who normally try to both sides everything can see it. When a sitting U.S. senator is going on Sunday shows saying this rhetoric is juvenile, embarrassing, and makes us look weak and stupid, and warning that this kind of talk increases risk for pilots, that's not partisan drama. That's a basic national security warning, because this is how you get people killed. You raise the temperature without a plan, you dare the other side to humiliate you, and then you feel compelled to escalate to protect your ego. And ego is not a war plan. Now let's talk about what Trump is doing to allies, because it's the other half of the disaster. He's insulting NATO like it's a bar fight. He's calling them a paper tiger, bragging that he tested them, mocking their capability, and then casually adding that Putin has zero fear of them. That is not telling hard truths. That is a president broadcasting alliance weakness like it's a stand-up routine while we're already in a high-risk conflict environment. You don't have to be a NATO superfan to understand the self-harm here. Alliances are deterrent structures. Even when you argue with allies, you don't publicly audition for the role of guy who undermines deterrence. That is the one job you don't take unless your real goal is to make the free world smaller, weaker, and more splintered. And this brings us to the other thing Trump's regime does every time. It lies about operational reality. Then the truth leaks out later in fragments. They declare smashing success. Then more details show up after the fact. Losses, damage, complications. The public gets the glossy version. The real version trickles out once the PR window passes. That's why the Iran side is openly mocking the United States, because Trump keeps declaring victory while the conflict keeps demonstrating the opposite, that Iran can strike back, that the region can ignite, and that American assets are not magically invulnerable just because Trump posts in all caps. And you can see how nervous the administration is about independent verification, because there's pressure described to keep commercial satellite firms from releasing certain imagery or data. When a government is confident in its narrative, it doesn't need to choke information flow from the outside. Restricting what can be seen is what you do when you know what can be seen contradicts what you've been saying. Now let's pull back and ask the question Trump refuses to answer. What is the plan? Not the threats, not the Stone Ages chest thumping, not the deadline theater. The plan, because if your plan is to scream at Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz while bragging that very little is off limits, you're not describing strategy, you're describing the absence of constraint. And when a president starts talking like very little is off limits, that's not tough. That's reckless. It suggests he's willing to treat an entire country as a target, which is morally unacceptable and strategically catastrophic. It's also the kind of rhetoric that makes adversaries dig in, makes allies back away, and makes the public wonder if the commander-in-chief understands the difference between military pressure and collective punishment. And here's what makes it even worse. Trump keeps contradicting himself. In the same breath, 1 minute, he's telling a reporter it'll be days, not weeks, because no sane group could withstand what he plans to do. Then he says he doesn't think ground troops will be necessary, but he doesn't rule anything out. Then he says there might be a deal tomorrow, then admits he has no idea whether there will be a deal, and then he slips right back into bragging about how Iran is getting the hell beat out of him. That's not a coherent commander-in-chief. That's a man streaming consciousness while holding power. And the country is supposed to accept this as normal, as a style, as just Trump being Trump? No. This is not a personality quirk. It's a governance failure. It's what happens when the most powerful office in the world is treated like a social media account with a defense budget. Meanwhile, the conflict is doing what conflicts do. It's spreading into infrastructure, petrochemical sites, and regional spillover. You see strikes, counterstrikes, facilities hit, and even incidents where defensive systems can malfunction or misfire in ways that create additional damage. In a real war environment, mistakes happen. Misidentification happens, systems fail, and when leadership is reckless, the risk of those failures multiplies. Which brings me to the part of this whole mess that should make Americans furious, the way parts of corporate media keep sanewashing this. They describe Trump's threats as unusually vivid instead of calling them what they are: unstable, dangerous, and disqualifying. They treat the cursing and the tantrums as colorful flourishes rather than as evidence that the man in the Oval Office is escalating a war in public like he's trying to impress an online crowd. And that's why a late-night host can sometimes tell the truth more clearly than a serious panel. Satire can cut through euphemism. It can say, no, actually, it's open as long as Iran doesn't shoot ships. Isn't reassurance, it's a confession that the problem is Iran shooting at ships. It can say, no, actually, demanding patriotic press, headlines isn't patriotism, it's propaganda. Trump wants you numb. He wants you to hear threats and shrug. He wants you to accept that presidents curse at foreign governments online and then call it negotiation. He wants you to accept that alliances are paper tigers, that Congress is optional, that deadlines are invented, that war is a ratings game, that truth is whatever he says at the moment he says it. The No Kings protesters have it exactly right. This country wasn't built to be ruled by impulse. It was built to be governed by law. So here's what responsible Americans should demand right now without apology. We demand congressional oversight and authorization for any expanded war effort. We demand a real plan, not deadline theater. We demand clear objectives, clear constraints, and a clear off-ramp. We demand that civilian harm is not treated as a bargaining chip. We demand transparency about what's happening, not patriotic headlines, but facts. And we demand that the president stop using war threats as a tool for personal ego management. Because the truth is brutally simple. If the United States looks weak right now, it's not because we lack military power. It's because our leadership is acting juvenile, loud, impulsive, contradictory, and unserious. And that isn't just embarrassing. It's dangerous.